Hi guys, Alex Simpson from Apex Racing UK, and I'm back for another stream setup how-to guide for the McLaren MP4-30. Well, it's not a stream. Unfortunately, Nürburgring Nürburgring's killed my frame rate, so I haven't been able to do both at once. So, done a little bit of running there tonight. I'm going to share the community setup on Monday night on the Apex forum. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to quite get it out tonight. I haven't really done too much running here in the past, and had so much going on today. It's been crazy. So, but I'll get that up there. This video will go out on sometime Monday morning as well. If you're watching it now, you probably picked it up. But they should all be there for the week anyway. Yeah, unfortunately, even with everything turned off and it looking like basically a tech track, I was still not able to do both. So I thought, well, there's no point in trying to show off off iRacing if I've had to turn the graphics down to sort of like 1980s or something like that just to get my frame rates locked in at over 145. So which I don't like to run on anything less. Last week we spoke about aero balance, and the week before that we talked about cambers, and the week before that we talked about pressures, I believe. So this week I want to talk about suspension. You know what the suspension does. Well, that's pretty straightforward, I guess. But exactly how we can affect it and what we can do to try and improve the balance of the car, make it fit our driving style a little bit more. So right, let me head on over to the sim. You can see I've logged some data. We'll come back to Motec in a bit, but just want to sort of jump into the sim first up and radio. Okay. So when we talk about the suspension, there's a fair amount that we can change, especially on the McLaren, and it can look kind of daunting the first time you look at this setup page. You know, people you normally used to seeing like, you know, the aero and the chassis, and that's kind of about it. And the dampers are all built in with this. I mean, it's just an absolute mindful. This is just the baseline high downforce setup right now. I mean, what I will say is that don't worry about it. It does look intimidating, but it all makes fairly common sense once you sort of understand exactly what everything does. Now, it's fairly common for people just to think, oh God, look at all these different springs and things like that, and just get crazy about it. So let's start to go through the core elements. So let's talk about all the different springs. So we've got the heave rates, we've got the torsion bars. Those are your main springs, but they affect the car in a very, very different way from each other. And then you've got your anti-roll bars. Those are your core elements to your suspension. Now, of course, we have got damping as well, but we'll talk about dampers completely separate because they're worth talking about on their own to a degree. So let's cover heave rates, ARBs, and torsion bars tonight. So we'll start off with the front end, and we'll start off with the front heave specifically. So what the heave does is the heave affects the up and down motion of the car. Now, specifically, it will affect your aero balance. It will affect how your car is under braking going into a corner, or how high the front end pokes up, say through like a long corner, like Watkins Glen Carousel, something like that. So if you've got yourself a stiff front heave rate, when you're going down the straight, the front end won't pop down too much. When you're going through a long corner, again, the ride height will stay quite high. Now, of course, if you've got high ride height on this, on this aero sensitive car, then you're going to have less gonna have less front downforce onto the car as well. So less turn, because that front end's just staying up a little bit more. Now, obviously, if you soften it up, then the principle is that the front end will drop down, and that you'll have more turn. But what you're not really affecting it. It's not really like a mechanical spring that where the like a corner spring like on a GT car or something like that, where the softer it is, the more it'll bite into the ground kind of thing and give you a bit more turn. This really has a more of effect on the aero than anything else. Yeah, yes, it will still give you a bit more grip because it is is a softer spring, but you really have to think about it. That's really microscopic. Really, where it comes into is how it affects the aerodynamics of the car, and how it transitions in and out of a corner in the braking and the acceleration zone, when you're really sort of getting heavy onto it. So if for example you're coming into a corner and your car is just bottoming out, as you're braking heavy, you can just hear it just scraping along the floor. You got it low and you're braking really hard and it just drags along the floor. Then a good idea will be to raise. Well, obviously you can raise your ride height, but you can also raise your heave rate as well, and that will just that will help prevent that from doing that. And it again, the same principle. If your front heave it is quite low, and you find your car to be a little bit snappy on entry, for example, and again that's probably just because your air balance is a little bit too high because you've got this really low heave. So consider just putting that up, and that will make the car a little bit less snappy. Of course, the opposite is true. If the car's not going to turn, then you can you can drop that down. If it's like an aero sensitive area, so like the initial part of turning or like a long corner, then drop that down, and that will help the car turn a little bit more. When we if we talk about the rear heave, as we'll get the heaves out of the way first. Again, it's very similar with that as well. Affects the ride height at speed. So as you're going into say like a corner, I tell you a good corner that I just sort of spoke to the Academy guys about as well is the Schumacher S. Very useful corner to bring up on as well. And you can see this is the rear ride height at the moment. We're looking at left and right, but the heave does control this. Right, sorry, I made a bit of a hash of that. I didn't change the view, so I'll cover that again. So yeah, so we were talking about the rear heave as well, and the front heave and how it affects it, but specifically the rear heave going through like the at Nürburgring. We have the Schumacher S. Now, if we have a stiff, let's start off with a soft. If we have a really soft rear heave, what we'll do is we'll have a particular ride height as we're going through that. This is what we call our ride height at speed, and you can see what mine is currently just with this particular bit of testing that I've done. Now you want to do a couple of laps to confirm those settings and make sure you haven't hit curb or anything crazy that's gonna push it out. But what you'll notice with it being really soft, that you'll get a ride height, and then if you go and increase the heave, let's say you take the 25 newton meters that it is on the default high downforce, just for an example, and then you go and whack it on 75, which is the max, and you go and look at the Motec figures and see what you get here, you'll notice that those figures are much higher on the high heave, right? And that will have a big impact on the aero balance of the car, and it'll have much more front downforce as well, and that will, and that will be what will make the car turn much more. Now obviously the car is a bit stiffer at the rear, so mechanically it will also turn a little bit more, but predominantly it's because the back end is just popped up in the air way more than if it was nice and soft. So you're maintaining a really high sort of front to rear percentage level on your aero balance, and that's what gives you the extra turn more than anything. Right, let's go back to the sim, and we'll talk about the torsion bars. Now, the torsion bars, if you come in from like GT3 or a much simpler open wheel car where you haven't had to deal with the heaves or anything like that, this is really sort of like your bread and butter of your suspension. GT is very much like that. A softer suspension will, gives you a bit more grip in the corner. That's the only way to describe that. But of course, you have to balance that out and make sure that you're not bottoming out as well. Because obviously, if it's a bit soft, then you can bottom out and hit the deck and scrub off speed that way. Or there might be some bumps in the middle of the corner that are a particular problem. So you just sort of have to manage that. So is soft or super soft always the way to go? Yeah, not necessarily. If you've got a lot of fuel on board and the torsions just cannot manage the amount of force being thrown into the corner because there's all this extra weight on there. You might have to sort of stiffen the car up so it doesn't roll too much. Because obviously the extra roll that you get from having a soft suspension, because of course, when you're leaning into a left-hand corner, for example, all of the weight is on the left-hand side of the car. So again, if I just head back to Motec for a second, if I go to roll, for example, you can see what I mean by the way the car rolls. Actually, no, that's not a very good example. Is there a ride height roll? That's a scatter graph. I don't want that. Yeah, we'll just do the traditional one. Right, what we've got is the blue is the left hand side and the green is the right hand side. Hopefully you can make it out. So, but as we go through turn 1, for example, look at the difference in the left hand ride height there. So it's much lower, and that's because the car has rolled over onto that left hand side. So that's what affects your cambers. That's why we need to get the camber set up for there as well, because the wheel's going to sort of come straighter as the suspension as the whole sort of car. Think of it more like that way. So it sort of does that kind of thing. Yeah, as the suspension comes over to it, stands the wheel up, and it might be that when you've got too much weight in the car with all the extra fuel, that it goes too far. So if you don't want to run too much extra camber, because it's going to burn the camber out of the tyre over a long run, then you might have to sort of resort to going a bit stiffer on the torsion bars, so that you just get a little bit less roll than what you need. So don't always resort to the softest spring. It's not always the best way to go. You might just have to stiffen up the spring. But of course, if you've got understeer, for example, then let me just head back to the sim. If you've got understeer, for example, then a usual tip is to go a little bit softer, and that should give you a tiny little bit of extra turn. Now, what it won't do is it won't help the initial turn in on this car. If you're having a problem with that initial bit of just instant turn in, you really need to look to the Heave for that, because that really is sort of more an aero thing. So think of the Heave for that. So soften up the Heave if you need that tiny little bit of initials. You're looking at sort of the second phase of the corner. If I just wind it on, so right now the car is just really leaning on the Heave right now, so it's all about the Heave spring, and even to this point here, that's the Heave, and now we start to transition into when it becomes to put the weight onto the torsion bar, and this is when the torque. So if you're understeering here, then that's your torsion. Yeah, all through here, that's your torsion bars. Yeah, but if it was before that, if say for example you're ploughing straight down here and you're going straight on a little bit, and then it's starting to bite, that's more gonna be your Heave. Right, the same principle goes with the rear of the car, again with the torsion bars as well. And again, it's affecting the roll. but also how the car grips coming out of the corner. I'll talk about the front in a moment with how it affects the grip as well. But again, a softer torsion bar will give you more grip in the corner. It'll let the car sort of really lean on the tire and everything else like that. A stiffer one will try and prevent that. Will try and prevent the roll, so to speak. But now, what you will have, there's a transition phase. So once you're talking nice and soft, gives you a lot of extra turn. But as you get to the point of the corner where you start to apply the gas, that's when the torsion bars have a bit of a different job. Just ignore my rubbish line through there, by the way. So we're basically back on the gas now. Now, what you get when you're getting back on the gas like we are now, with a stiff torsion, the car will not dig in as much as a softer one. Yeah, and now by not digging in, it means that it's gonna kind of like sort of slip across the asphalt, which is what will give you a bit of extra rotation. So if you're understeering coming off of the corner, for example, yeah, then what you'll need to do is you'll need to go up on your torsion bar. But if you get too much rotation, then you want to go down. Just give yourself a little bit of extra grip. But the same is very true with the front end. If you've got, it's slightly the opposite way round. If you've got understeer, you want to go softer, because you obviously want the car to grip more coming out of the corner. So you want that extra rotation coming off. And but if you've got oversteer coming out of the corner, then you want to stiffen it up, and that will give you a little bit of extra stability. So you've got to fine tune it, and this is really how you can really fine tune when you use the Heave and the torsion bars together, and you understand exactly what part of the corner it is that you want that extra support or extra turn in. You just sort of have to break the corner down into it's almost into 5 sections really. You've kind of got your initial turn in, and then you've got your sort of entry phase until you hit the apex itself, the exit phase, and then pretty much as you're unwinding the gas and getting on full throttle, and that leans back towards the rear heave and the front heave again, and how they transition. Of course, damping has a big effect to how the suspension works as well, but we'll go on to that on a separate video. Let's talk about ARB quickly, because it's pretty fundamental to the suspension and works in a similar way to the torsion bars. It affects the roll, and they do very, very much a similar thing. If and you kind of use both of them as a tool to fine tune your balance of the car. So think of the like I say, the Heave affects the up and down motion, and the torsion bars and the anti-roll bar is the sort of the rocking motion. If you check that in the motor, you'll see how much the car's rocking. Now on like ovals and things like that, of course they want to try and maintain their ride heights through those corners. So the anti-roll bars are a major factor for them, as well as their corner springs. For us, like I say, it's just an additional tool that we can use. If, say for example, your front torsion bars are as soft as they can get, and you just haven't got enough turn, well, you'll go down on the front anti-roll bar. That will give you a little bit more turn. If you find that you've got too much exit rotation, for example, but your torsion bars are already maxed out at the front, well, then you'll go up on your front anti-roll bar, and that will just calm off that exit a little bit. And that's basically the same principle. As lower gives you more turn, and higher will give you less turn. But what it also does is it makes the car a higher ARB. It makes the car more responsive as well, because because it tries to prevent the roll. Then a stiffer ARB will have a better change of direction, So if you were to have, say, 100 and 100 on the ARBs, and you try and take it through a chicane, for example, you'll feel how much more responsive the car is. It will want to change direction much quicker. When we're talking about the rear ARB, the way that works is, again, a softer anti-roll bar will give you more grip. So if you've got oversteer going into a corner, then you can soften the anti-roll bar. If you've got oversteer sort of mid-corner, again the same thing, but you're already your torsion bars are already down to what, I think 25 is it minimum? Yeah, 25. You know, then you can resort to going to your anti-roll bar just to try and give you a little bit of extra. If you haven't got enough turn, then you'll go stiffer on that, and that'll give a bit more turn. But again, you've got to balance sort of front to back and obviously entry to exit as well. So there's lots of different things. What you kind of want to do with the suspension is you kind of want to get it in a ballpark. So you're like, right, the car's turning in nice and it's turning out quite nice, but now it just needs fine tuning, and that is when we would switch over to the dampers and we'll fine tune the balance. So you want to get it right. You'll know when you're getting it better. You'll see it in your optimals, you'll see it in your lap times. The car will start to feel a lot better, and then we head on over to the dampers, and we'll get that car ultra fine tuned. Right, again, I'm sorry I couldn't do the video live this week, but I'm hoping you found that particularly useful. And like I say, we'll talk about dampers in a bit of basic detail next week, which I think is going to be for Monza. So I'm not quite sure how much work we're going to do on it. Apex Racing UK, unfortunately, going to miss next WCS race because we are all at Silverstone enjoying the World Endurance Championship for 4 days. I think there's 18 of us going down there. Yeah, should be fun, but unfortunately, yeah, we're going to miss a race, which would be a bit gutted about. I think we're going to try and set up a couple of rigs, so there might be a few of us on the grid, but I don't think we're going to take it quite as seriously as you would do. Have a lot of fun this week racing at Nürburgring. What I will show you guys is my graphic setting. If you're on triple screens and you're struggling with graphics, don't be afraid to turn everything off. I have had to turn everything off to keep 145 frames. I know it doesn't look like everything's off on that shot there. That's because on the replay mode it's turned on. But literally, I have got everything cranked right down to get my 145 frames back. So yeah, it's not great. I've got two NVIDIA 780 Ti's in there, overclocked. And a pretty beefy i7 running like 4.3 or something like that, all water cooled and overclocked to wazoo. But yeah, I still can't get that. I am on DX9. I haven't tried it on DX11, but been having a couple of little issues on 11, so I might have to try that. But yeah, if you're struggling, that will do. There are obviously other things you can do. Obviously, take the render each screen separately. That will give you a massive jump in frame rates as well, but it'll really mess up with your field of view. Right, thank you everybody for tuning in. I hope you found this useful. If you've got any comments or questions or anything else like that, post them on the video, post them in YouTube, or come onto our forum and ask me some questions on there. You know, I'm happy to help. This is what we're doing these videos for, really. We don't mind. We realise that, you know, it's a daunting car, and you know, people want to come and have a play with it, but they see that and they're just like, what am I doing? And this is why we're doing these basic setups. So we're taking the baselines, making them a bit more drivable for you, and doing these videos so you can start to tweak them to fit your own driving style. But yeah, so next week will be Monza, but we'll be talking about dampers through Monza. It should be a good one actually, because there's those chicanes there as well, so we can talk about the high-speed dampers and how the car transitions in and out of those tricky slow-speed corners, and the sort of some of the higher speed stuff as well. All right, guys, have a good week's racing, and yeah, I'll catch you next week at Monza.